In this Vortex Selects, we learn from success as our friends from Seek One, The Hunting Public, Heartland Bowhunter, and Driven break down exciting and unique hunts, dissecting the why that ultimately put them sitting behind some great bucks. It's time to watch and learn.
Hey guys, Michael Hunsucker here with Heartland Bowhunter, and I have next to me one of my more memorable hunts of recent history. This was an absolutely incredible hunt, and it was one that we kind of had followed this deer. He was really at the top of our list, obviously, and had watched him grow throughout the summer months. But since I wasn't going to be hunting until November, I didn't really have him pinned down. And during November, you leave so much up to chance. And so we knew where he was in the area, what area he liked to be in, but the area that he liked to spend most of his time was tough for us to access. So we had to think outside the box. Actually got permission from the neighboring landowner to come in and cross the creek on his side. So this buck was living in a giant chunk of tamarack bushes right across the river. So we were able to slip in the stand that morning, come right across the creek undetected, get in there in the dark. I look up not long after daylight and I see this giant frame cruising through there, and he was not going to give us a shot. And I had to make a split-second decision on, how aggressive I wanted to be. Being that it was the rut, I said, let's do this, pick the horns up, bang them together, and didn't hear anything at first, and all of a sudden I look up, and coming through the tamaracks, just crunching his way through, was this giant frame. He came in, offered us a perfect broadside shot, and it wasn't long and I had my hands on one of my biggest bucks to date, and certainly one of the most impressive frames of a deer that I've ever shot. So just goes to show you, sometimes you can think outside the box, get a little bit creative, and change the way you approach a property, and it can pay off in the end. Dude. Oh my gosh. Look at those beams. What in the world? That is a monster. Look at his head. It's like everything is huge. I don't even know how big this deer is. I don't even know what to say. I mean, he's big enough. I mean, just a giant.
Hey guys, this is Pat Reeve with Driven with Pat and Nicole. This is a hunt that we're going to recap for a legendary buck we call the Flyer. This buck was well known in the local area, and he did not live consistently on our property and was very elusive and nocturnal. So we had to devise a game plan to hunt this particular buck. What did we do? We decided to build a water hole, because I've learned one thing over the years. Deer can go without food, but they gotta have water. So we built a water hole back in the timber near a bedding area in that transition zone. I felt like if a buck was gonna get up during daylight hours and come to water, he would have to do it near his bedding area, which made him feel, comfortable and secure because there was cover. And that allowed us to also slip in there undetected and hunt that area and never let the deer know that we were after them. The key to this spot was the stand approach, and we could exit without ever tipping them off. And we used a north wind to do that. We did not go in there and hunt it at all during bad wind situations. So we waited for those perfect conditions, right? As it happens a lot of times up here in the Midwest, we'll get a dry, warm period during the fall. That's the perfect time to hunt water, because like I said, deer gotta have water every day. After quite a few sets for this buck, he finally showed himself after hearing a younger buck chasing a doe. He came in to investigate, he came to the water to get a drink, and I was presented a perfect broadside shot. To break down the hunt, we put the water hole back in that transition area. We targeted that buck specifically. We knew his habits because we trusted in our trail cameras to help do the scouting. And I knew that if we were going to get a crack at this buck, we would have to move back in the cover and not hunt him out on the food source, because he was just super nocturnal. And of course, the water provided him that water source that he would a lot of times have to go down in the valley to get. And then we moved it up on top of the ridge where we had a true wind. So the stand approach was also a very key part of it. that we could slip in there undetected. He wouldn't hear us coming as he's in his bedding area, and of course he wouldn't see us. And we would then, intercept the deer as they moved from the bedding area out to the food source, and they just simply never knew they were being hunted. So these are some key points that you can do, some easy tactics. Build a water hole, provide that water source, and hopefully you can put a legendary buck in your lap.
Hey everybody, I'm Zach Ferenbaugh with the Hunting Public, and I'm here with a recap of my North Dakota hunt from 2020. So before we even went on the hunt, we were looking for things like rivers, small creeks, or reservoirs that were holding water all year. On the public land that we were hunting, that's where the whitetails were concentrated. Once we got there, we spent a bunch of time checking out those different spots to see where there was a lack of hunting pressure. We eventually found a spot where it didn't seem like anybody had been into. We hiked up to a high point where we could glass a big river bottom, and that first evening in there, we spotted several nice bucks. When we got in there the next morning, we saw that same group of bucks that we had seen the night before, and because they never bedded in a spot that we were able to pinpoint exactly, we decided that we were just going to stay patient, keep glassing that river bottom, and hope that a buck would readjust and put himself in a more vulnerable position. I started getting a little impatient, and I started walking down the ridge, glassing into the river bottom from different angles. I eventually got to the end of the ridge, and from there I could see into a patch of cottonwoods that we weren't able to see into from our original glassing location. Eventually I peeked over the cliff, I looked down into that cottonwood bottom, and I saw a big buck down there feeding. I frantically got a hold of the rest of the guys, told them I had spotted a big buck, and on their way over, I watched him bed down. The first thing that we did was take photos from above. That way we could reference those photos once we were down at his level. Once we made our plan, we circled downwind, dropped down off that cliff, got to his level, and started crawling through about waist-high brush. Once we got to where we knew we were within bow range of the buck, I nocked an arrow, and there was two spots that Jake and I were looking at that we thought the buck might be bedded. When he stood up, he looked right at us, and he knew something wasn't right, but he wasn't sure if it was danger or not. So I just stayed patient. Jake filmed the buck, and he eventually turned to where I knew his eyes weren't right on us. I was already at full draw, and I just popped up, settled the pin, and made the shot. There's a couple key takeaways from this hunt. In open country like this, we were able to glass deer without going directly into bedding areas and risk spooking them. Within that strategy of glassing though, something that I learned on this hunt is to not be complacent in your glassing location. Had I not got up and moved down that ridge, I would have never spotted that buck. I think it's really important that you continue to move around and glass from different angles, especially if you can do it safely without being detected. Once we spotted the buck, I think it's really important that we took those photos to reference different landmarks once we were at his level. It would have been really hard to know exactly where he was just because everything pretty much looked the same. The final takeaway on this hunt is stay patient even if a deer has pinpointed your location. I think had I tried to force a shot when he was looking at us, I think he probably would have spooked. But he eventually turned his head in a way that allowed me to sit up, put the pin on him, and make that shot. It was tons of fun, and hopefully if you're watching this video, you can take away some of the things that we did to be successful if you find yourself in a similar situation.
Buck. It's him. It's a shooter. Right here.
Hey guys, Lee here from Seek One, giving you guys a recap on my Tennessee velvet hunt from this past season. What made this hunt challenging? So the time of year is what made this hunt challenging. It's really hot. It's late in the summer, it's late August, and these deer are in their summer ranges, which sometimes are super, super small. You've almost got to land right on top of these deer to have a chance at them. I was not right in the core of these deer's summer range. I was sort of on the fringes. So it was not an ideal setup because the places where these deer were summering, I just couldn't get access to hunting. So I was hoping to catch them kind of on the fringes of their core areas that time of year. Some intel that I had is I've got 4 years of history at this particular spot. I have an idea of what these deer do. And essentially the layout was big block of woods on my west, big block of woods on my east, and I was set up in a narrow pinch, basically a massive funnel following a creek ditch behind some houses. And these deer were kind of working from that big block, coming into this little funnel right between me and my stand. I've also had a food plot in this area for 4 years, so I've been able to get these deer kind of used to lingering around in here a little bit. I had some good cold water, moving fresh water that these deer were really liking in that area. Just made this low-lying creek ditch area a lot cooler temperature-wise than some of these other places, and these deer definitely favored moving up and down this creek ditch.
It's him. It's a shooter. Right here. Dude, it's the giant. It's the giant. Jack, you did it, boy. That's the giant. That's the giant, dude. He's down right here. Yes, yes, yes. I haven't seen him here in weeks. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, dude. Look at the flyer. Look at that deer. Dude, he is gorgeous. And I'm super thankful we made a good shot. He went 20 yards and was dead in seconds. My biggest takeaway is that if I was simply going on my trail cameras, I probably would not have hunted this area. I think that sometimes we rely too hard on what our cameras are showing, and especially in a state where you cannot bait. Tennessee, you can't bait. You're only getting a small glimpse of what's actually happening in the woods from your trail camera. So my biggest takeaway is to not always rely on your trail cameras. Sometimes it's good to just go in and hunt.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Aaron from the Hunting Public. I want to talk to you guys today about a tactic that we've used in the past, especially during the rut, that has helped us find success in the whitetail woods. Me, Gooch, and Greg had a crazy hunt in the Georgia mountains a few years ago with a muzzleloader. And there was a bunch of different tactics that went into this hunt, but the one that really sticks out in my mind is we actually spooked this buck. We bumped him, and then about 2 hours later, we dumped him. That's why you call it the bump and dump tactic, if you will. But what happened was, me and Greg and Gooch, we were still hunting along this bench. There's an elevation line about halfway down this hill where it flattens out. And over the previous week of hunting, that's where we saw the majority of the deer, was along that elevation. So that morning we started out just still hunting, looking for deer, trying to spot them out ahead of us through the open timber. And all of a sudden, out of the thick laurel right above us on the hill came a doe screaming out of there with 3 bucks behind her, including this one really big one. And as you can tell, me and Gooch are trying to get in a position to shoot this thing, and it just doesn't happen. Eventually, the doe and one of the bucks gets tired of staring at 3 guys standing on the side of the hill, and they blow and they spook and they run over the ridge. Well, a lot of folks, including myself, would normally give up on this situation because we just spooked them. It's like, man, that stinks. We were this close to getting a shot. In reality, what happens most of the time when you softly bump a deer like this is they run 300 or 400 yards to the next available safe location. That could be the next available thick pocket of cover, and then they stop. They reassess the situation, and if the danger is not pursuing them, they stop and they get comfortable. That's what we see over and over again. Now, that's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It can be different in different situations, but often we see them exhibit this type of behavior. And in this case, that buck took the doe about 400 yards away. They went up and over 4 ridges into the next thick patch of laurel, and that's where they were. It took me, Greg, and Gooch a couple hours to find them, just by still hunting and popping over those ridges. But eventually we popped over the 4th ridge and started glassing in this laurel thicket and saw one of the bucks bump the doe in and out of it. Got in position for a shot, crawled over the ridge where we could see that biggest buck, and it took me 2 tries, but eventually got one in him, and it was a heck of a hunt. So keep that in mind if you're hunting during the early part of the rut, or any part of the rut for that matter. If you bump into a big buck and a doe, that's not game over. That could mean that you're just getting started.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you like these videos as much as I did, tune into the Vortex Nation podcast, where we dig even deeper into the backstory and tactics that led to success.